to the All Around Adventure Podcast, the show where you hear amazing tales from afar and the all-important life lessons that go along with them. Here's your host, Josh Guerrero.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Josh Guerrero here, and welcome to the All Around Adventure Podcast. Whether you're joining me for the first time or if you've been listening for a while now, I certainly do want to welcome you here. And as always, I want to thank you for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on and that there's so much out there on the internet these days that's trying to get your attention and distract you. But it just means the world to me that you've chosen to download and listen to this podcast. Now, if you are in fact new to this podcast and you're not entirely sure what we're all about here, this is the show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. And those will be stories from myself, as well as the amazing guests that I welcome on this podcast. And I'm talking with travelers of all kinds on this show. I have elite warriors, digital nomads, best-selling authors, bloggers, philanthropists, adventurers, you name it. If they have a fantastic travel story to tell with some great life lessons to share, I'm bringing them on this podcast and extracting their stories and life lessons through powerful conversations to help you level up in your life. But this is a different episode that you're tuning into today. For this one, you just have me, and this is Travel Reflections, which is exactly how it sounds, where I just talk about some of my own travel experiences and try to extrapolate some life lessons from my stories, and hopefully you can implement them in your own life in some way to benefit you. And you notice that the title for this episode is Unplug from the Modern World. Now, the inspiration behind this episode comes from a recent podcast interview that I did. I was interviewed for a different podcast, and I was asked about my time in the Peace Corps. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, you've certainly would have heard by now that I used to be a Peace Corps volunteer. I lived in the Gambia, which is a small country in West Africa, for 2 years, and definitely an amazing experience. Definitely took a lot away from that. And having this interview and kind of opening up a little bit about my experience, I kind of came to this idea that I wanted to share for this episode. And one thing that I sort of struggled with when I was living over there was I was pretty cut off from the modern world, so to speak. I didn't have internet in my house. I had like just your little standard cell phone. I didn't have a smartphone. And I, didn't really have much means to check things like social media, send emails, and we only did mail run like once a month. So I was pretty kind of cut off from my friends and family back home stateside. So sometimes isolation got to me. But at the same time, though, I would say that there was something liberating about not being so connected to the modern world. I was able to focus on myself and do things like read books, exercise, and just kind of immerse myself in this culture that I was now a part of and learn a lot of things. And I could kind of explore nature in and around my village and just be present in the moment. So there was, even though I would say, yes, it was a con that I wasn't able to connect with friends and family, I would also say that there was a pro in that I was able to do many other things and work on myself. So I always say that there is a dichotomy towards, all this technology that we have in the modern world. I mean, we could use it to connect with people from far, far away. I know that through this podcast, I've been able to connect with some amazing people through things like social media and being able to send emails to prospective guests. And, it's opened up a lot of opportunities for me, again, just to not only connect with some amazing people, but just to seek out other opportunities potentially in the future. But at the same time, though, I also have observed just how destructive being so connected to things like, again, the internet and social media can be. I see like a lot of people do a lot of comparison where they look at other people's highlight reels on social media and then they think to themselves, well, my life must not be so great because I'm not living it up like this person is or that person is. Or, I also notice that some people have a lot of issues with self-esteem, especially, or self-image, where they don't think that they're as good as looking as someone else who posts pictures of themselves on social media and what have you. And then I also, just in the last year, and I don't want to dive too deep down this rabbit hole, but it's just, there's a lot of social tension and a lot of tension in the realms of politics too. And, this was getting a lot of people at each other's throats. And I've seen lifelong relationships be shattered in an instant over just political views and things like that. So a lot of good things can come from being so well connected to all this technology, but then a lot of destructive things can happen from being so well connected to all this technology. So it really just kind of boils down to just being deliberate and intentional with how you use these things. And so today I kind of want to talk about 4 different strategies that you can implement to get the most out of being connected to the modern world, but also just thinking about unplugging from the modern world from time to time. And that's actually going to be tip number 1, and it just corresponds with the title, and that is to just unplug every now and then. Take kind of a social media detox and just not check your phone for a couple of days. Maybe take a little vacation, go hiking in the wilderness. And I remember one time I took a cruise to the Bahamas and I didn't check internet for 5 days just simply because I couldn't. I didn't have signal in the Bahamas, which is where I had sailed to. So that's tip number 1. Just find means to do a social media detox. And even if it means having to schedule it. And if you're someone who has maybe a significant following, or you use social media to promote like your business or your brand or whatever else, your blog, just tell your followers, hey, just a quick heads up. I'm going to be absent for like the next 4 to 5 days or however long you tend to make it. And I guarantee you, if they're committed followers, they'll be there. They'll be there when you get back. So, but yes, that's tip number 1, to unplug from the modern world. Just, try not to, or to take a social media detox every now and then and go do something for yourself and not have to worry about checking these things every so often. So, so that's tip number 1. Now, tip number 2, this is one I think is really important because it's a habit that I believe many people have. And I say that because I too had this habit, and every now and then I do struggle with it. And that is, don't check social media first thing in the morning. Like, I think a lot of people have their phones right on their nightstands. As soon as they wake up, they just roll over in their bed, grab their phone, roll back over, and start scrolling through social media. Your morning time is a very critical part of your day. It's how you get the day going. And it's also time for yourself to do whatever it is that you want before you have to go fulfill obligations, whether it's, obligations with a career or obligations as maybe the leader of a family or whatever else. That's your time. Don't forfeit your time by scrolling through other people's social media accounts. Just don't do it. And I guarantee you that'll help you set your day out on a positive note, and then you can go ahead and start crushing it through the day. So, that's tip number 2. Don't check social media first thing in the morning. Now, tip number 3, and this kind of corresponds with sort of what I was talking about earlier on in this episode, and that is, think of social media as a tool. And I remember this is how I first viewed social media and platforms like Facebook and what have you back in the early 2000s when it first came out. I was in the Marine Corps at the time, and I was using it as a means to connect with friends and family who were living back home. I would update them as to what was going on within my service. things that I have done, accomplishments I attained, promotions I achieved, posted a couple of pictures if I went on a detachment here or there, just to update them as to what was going on in my life. And then I could see what was going on in their lives, because I have a pretty big extended family. I wanted to see what my cousins were doing and things like that. So I was using it as a tool to connect with my friends and family from far away. And then, of course, I also now use it as a tool to try to find guests to come on this podcast. And again, using it as that means I've been able to connect with some pretty amazing people, and you've heard some stories and life lessons from some pretty amazing people already, and the bulk of them have been through social media. And so that's how I like to use it. And so it becomes a matter of just using it as a tool and not trying to consume it as much, to where you're spending hours and hours and hours just scrolling through. And the algorithms on these different platforms, they're designed to keep you as engaged as long as possible. And they're minding your attention so that way they could show ads from their advertisers that are paying them money to, for your eyes and for your attention. So keep that in mind and just kind of focus on using it as a tool. And that would lead me to the next tip, and that is to set a timer. Again, to use it as a tool and not to consume it as much. I know, at least on Instagram, you could set a timer that it tracks how long you've been on there, and then it'll give you just a quick alert saying you've been on for, I don't know, however long you set, and then that just kind of gives you that little reminder that, okay, I've been on here long enough, I should go and do something else. And so that's tip number 4. Set a time limit to that you allow yourself to use social media within the day, and you can actually use a timer. And I know there's like other apps and platforms or something like that you can use, but unfortunately, I don't even know. I didn't even think to look them up before I got on here, but they're out there. So yeah, that's tip number 4. And actually, I got 5 tips for you all today. So I guess bonus tip number 5. And this is going to be a pretty simple one. At least I'd like to think it would be, but then again, you never know. And that is, don't engage. And what I mean by that is, if you're going through social media and you see something that makes you upset or angry, either with something that a person posts, or that, maybe some sort of business or other entity posts, and you want to say something, you want to just you just want to blast them with whatever's on your mind. And I would just say, think twice about it and don't engage. Because I know I've had that happen a couple of times where I would see something, I would get upset or angry, and I really just want to light the person up. But then I remind myself, just don't engage and just move on. Because here's one thing I've kind of learned early on with social media, is that whatever you put out there is there to stay. Once it's on the internet, you're not taking it back. And you'd like to think you'd be able to delete something, but then you never know if someone's going to take a screenshot, use it as ammo against you later on down the line, or if you put stuff out there and you're engage in squabbles on social media or in the comments section of certain posts, your employer could see that. And then, they may think twice about their decision to have you as part of their team or whatever else. And then also, it's just think about what would actually come from you engaging there. What value does it attribute to anyone when you do? And are you going to look back on that later on down your life and just be really excited and proud of yourself that you stuck it to someone on social media one time? Because from what I've observed, maybe this has been different from others, but at least from what I've observed, is that when people engage in these squabbles on social media, people get pissed off, nothing gets solved, and the problem is still there. And so the only thing that really came from that is now people got pissed off at each other. And, some people have asked me in the past, it's why don't I say something when I see this about is something in the realm of politics or whatever else. And this is all I'm really going to say about that, and what my opinions are in the realm of politics. And, when I see, like I said, lifelong friends or family members, not talking to each other anymore over their political views. But here's what my thoughts are on that. Is like, I'm not going to demonize my friends or my family because of a couple of politicians out there that don't even know who the fuck I am. It's just not really worth it to dive deep down into the realm of politics that way, where I'm going to demonize people that will actually be there for me when shit goes sideways. Because I know that these politicians that everyone seems to be fighting about, they're not going to do a damn thing if something goes wrong in my life. But my beloved friends and my family, I know they would be there for me regardless of what our political views are. So that's all I'm going to say on that. And actually, that's my fifth and final tip wrapped up. Just to recap really quick, the first one is, of course, to unplug from the modern world, take a social media detox, and, take a little bit of time off, travel, take a vacation, or just, find other fulfilling activities to work on yourself. Number two is to do not check social media first thing in the morning. The morning time is your time. Don't forfeit your time to other people by scrolling through their social media accounts. Number three, it is to use it as a tool. Use it as a means to connect with amazing people who uplift you. And number four is to set a timer or set a time limit, I guess I'll say. And you can use a timer tool for that. So that way you're not spending so much time on there and you're not trying to stay too engaged, and the algorithm is going to try to keep you on there as long as possible. And then the last one, number five, is simply don't engage. And I think I've already kind of said what I needed to say on that one. So, all right, well, that's the episode for today. I hope you all found it beneficial. If you did, be sure to subscribe wherever you might be listening to it. We got a brand new episode coming out every single Monday. So hit the subscribe button so that way you don't miss a single episode. And you can also support the podcast by sharing this episode with a friend or family member who you think might also enjoy it. You can also head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Only takes a couple of minutes of your time, but those ratings and reviews go such a long way to getting the word out about this podcast, so that way more people can find it and get some value from it as well. Also, we got a private Facebook group called Travel Titans. If you want to interact with other travelers like you can head over to facebook.com/groups/Travel Titans, and we look forward to seeing you there. And the last thing that I would like to share before I call it a day here is I just want to thank you very much for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, but it just means so much to me that you've chosen to download this podcast and listen to what I had to say today. And I greatly appreciate it, and I certainly don't take it for granted. And that's all I have to say for now, and I'll be back next Monday with a brand new episode featuring another fantastic guest. So be sure to check back in. But until then, I'm Josh Guerrero saying be safe, happy travels, and always move forward.